Hi everyone, I'm Ron Zilca. I'm a research scientist, technology entrepreneur, and an author. And in the past 10 years, my work has been focused on behavior change using technology. More specifically, ways in which people can truly transform their life by changing mindsets and by changing perspectives. What I'd like to talk to you about today is how to go on the ride of your life one step at a time. And there are two interesting things about this statement. The first one is ride. What is a ride? What do you feel when you go on a ride? You feel exhilaration, you feel excited, you feel a little risky, so perhaps a little challenging. So being on the ride of your life really means leaving your comfort zone, and it truly means to be alive. And the other word is step. How do you break down a grand vision into something you can follow on a daily basis with a daily set of steps? So in essence, what we're going to be talking about today is how to live an exciting and meaningful life each day of your life. How's that? So the process we will go through today is very interesting. It's based on some great scientific foundations like positive psychology, self-determination theory, social psychology, and I've used it in some of the apps and the tools that I built over the years in my companies. But I've also used it in my personal life. And it turned my life around completely. I found myself riding a motorcycle from New York to California, selling my company, moving to a different continent, and a lot of interesting personal changes, which I will probably tell you more about in subsequent classes. So today, let's focus on the process itself. You may be at a crossroads right now in your life, or perhaps you're feeling stuck. A lot of people do. Perhaps you're just in need of some change, and you feel like you want to kind of go on the road. So here are some 10 big ideas that you can arm yourself with that will help you go on the road, go on the ride of your life, one step at a time and every day. The first two are kind of general guidelines. So they're good to keep in mind. They're just things to think about. And then the remaining 8 are basically a step-by-step process. So think about it as going through software perhaps, or going through a worksheet and just doing it step by step. So number 1, choosing your words wisely. Words are very important. Words are essentially the lens through which we see the world. So the words you choose have a dramatic effect on your perspective. They actually comprise your perspective is comprised of the words you choose. For example, a lot of people talk about their dreams, and a dream is something that by definition is outside of reality. You dream when you sleep. You dream about things that are unattainable, perhaps. So the word dream in itself potentially has, it could potentially undermine your motivation to actually do something because it's a dream. It's something that is not a part of real life. So instead of a dream, maybe use the word plan. And if you say, I dream of riding a motorcycle from coast to coast, as opposed to, I plan to ride a motorcycle from coast to coast, that's a huge difference right there. The other thing in terms of language is maybe to use more deterministic language, to say, I will, and not I may, or not I might, and to set a deadline, even if you don't meet it. So I can tell you, for example, I've been working on my book, my first book, for the past 4 years. It's about to come out soon. And when I took the motorcycle ride in 2010, it was in the fall of 2010, and people asked me when the book will be out. And I thought, well, I'm going to be riding and writing along the way. Probably will take me 3 months. And so, yeah, by the end of 2010. And obviously that didn't happen. The end of 2011 didn't happen. And, it's now been 4 years. But I'm fairly sure that if I wouldn't put a deadline on it, and I wouldn't say, I plan to write a book concretely, and I plan to release it by the end of the year, it would never be released. Not in 4 years, not ever. So words, use your words very, very wisely. The second one is to follow a structured plan. If you think about it, any goal that's not immediately attainable, anything that you can't do within a minute or within a day, requires a program, a set of steps to go through. Think about college education, for example. Let's say engineering school, it takes 8 semesters. There are dependencies between courses. It's very complicated. There's prerequisites and so on. But once you enter the program, you follow it step by step. At any semester, you know which courses you need to take so that at the end of 4 years, you become an engineer. And once you're in it, you just follow it. So you don't think each and every day about becoming an engineer. You think about the paper you need to submit, or you think about the exam you need to study for. So really breaking down things into something you can do bite size each and every day. So these are the two kind of general things to keep in mind. Kind of put them in your backpack, right, along the way as you're on the road. And let's start the process itself. The big idea, the first big idea in the process is to create a meaningful and unique vision. And people talk a lot about creating a vision and vision board and so on. I think one important thing to keep in mind is that a vision needs to be comprehensive. You know, oftentimes people will say, I'm unsatisfied with my job, or I'm unsatisfied with my marriage. And that may be true, but usually there are dependencies between different domains of your life. So the first thing to do is really kind of review your entire life, your romantic life, your friends, family, health, fitness, everything, and give yourself a little score on how satisfied you are with each and every one of these domains. And 10 out of 10 times, people discover that there are things there that they didn't really realize. It could be that the root of your dissatisfaction with your job has to do with something else, with something personal. So it really helps you create a broad picture. And then, armed with that knowledge about what's missing and where the gaps are, then construct a vision that is not abstract, that is almost a daily vision for a day in your future ideal life. Because it's very abstract to think. People say, oh, what I want for myself is I want to be happy, or I want to have an education, I want to do this, want to do that. It's one thing to say, I want to be a spy, and it's a different thing altogether to think about a day in the life of a spy that may actually be comprised of a lot of boring paperwork. So think about a day in your life, in your ideal life. Where do you want to wake up? Who do you want to wake up with? What time do you want to wake up? You know, what is the first thing you do? What do you do later? How do you close the day? Where do you go to sleep? Who do you spend the time with during the day? Just really focus on that one day and create a single day in your routine future life that is very meaningful to you. And from that, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new information will bubble. Once you have this vision, the next step is to break it down into specific goals. And it's a big friction point for a lot of people because goals are something you commit to. So you start to get antsy. Say, well, yeah, I want to live by the beach and I want to wake up at 11 a.m. and I want to be spending the day writing and swimming. But then you have to break that down into goals and it starts feeling uncomfortable, which is good. The trick there is to write down a list of possible goals. Just put the commitment out of the equation. Just go through the exercise of breaking down your vision into goals that you may or may not pursue. You don't have to commit to them yet. You're not taking any steps yet. You're just breaking this vision into specific, measurable goals. So you could put a goal of if you do want to live at the ocean side, researching different places that you can move to, or researching different communities, or maybe just learning about what it is to live by the ocean. Maybe take a vacation to one of these places and try it out. But don't allow yourself to get anxious about the tension of, oh, am I actually doing this? Think that you're not doing it. Just put it on paper. Paper tolerates anything. Or just going through the motions of breaking down that vision that was also on paper onto a fresh new piece of paper that is more detailed. But make the list and make it itemized. So now you have your list of possible goals. The next step is to evaluate them. And that could be tricky because before this step, you allowed yourself to just kind of have everything you want, which is great. That is where you should start. But it was just kind of like you rubbed the magic lamp and the genie came out and you asked for stuff, snapped your fingers, and it was done. But you do want to get to a point, some point, where you actually start pursuing these things actively, and you can't do everything. So like everyone knows, entrepreneurs know in startup companies, the number one value, the number one determinant of success is focus. The number one determinant of success in any project is focus. You have to know not what to do, because that's easy, but what not to do. So to do that, to prune out the goals that you decide consciously and intentionally and deliberately not to pursue, you have to somehow rank them against each other. And there are ways to do that. So there are 6 primary questions you can think about and go through each of these candidate goals, these possible goals, and try to answer these 6 questions. The first one, are you doing this really for yourself or for others? Are you doing it to satisfy someone else, someone else's need, someone else's expectations perhaps? The second one is it an end goal or is it a stepping stone? Is it a means to an end? Because a lot of time people get hung up on something that is only a means to an end to get to something else, where sometimes they can go straight to the end goal if they know how to spell it out. My favorite example is money. A lot of people will tell you, I would love to blank, but I can't afford it. So my goal is just to make a lot of money. Where maybe if you would break down this notion of where you actually want to go into steps or into specific goals, you could actually find ways to do it without having to make all that money. Maybe you can afford it. Maybe you can live by the ocean if you shack up with someone else. I don't know. I don't know what the best example is. But try to think about that it's not a stepping stone. The danger with stepping stones is that you get it done and then you're not satisfied, you're not motivated because your end goal seems even kind of farther away. So that's number 2. Number 3 is to think about goals that are approach oriented versus avoidance oriented. If one of your candidate goals is about trying to avoid something bad, that's not as good as trying to pursue something good. So for example, if you go to medical school and your goal in becoming a medical doctor is to help others, or if your goal is to establish yourself professionally or intellectually, or if your goal is to understand the world better, those are positive things that you're going to acquire. But if your goal in going to medical school is to avoid being poor, or to avoid having, I don't know, lack of social status. And of course, it's a game of words, but again, these words really matter. So if you feel like there's the motivation for pursuing a certain goal is to avoid something bad, give it, one notch down in your score. The fourth one is how harmonious it is with your other goals, how much in line it is with your other goals. Because you can have maybe the greatest goal in the world, but if it conflicts with your other goals, it's going to hold you back. So just, again, give yourself a 0 or a 1 for each of these 6 and add up the numbers, right? Something simple like that. Number 5 is activity versus circumstance. There are certain goals that are aimed at an activity, at doing something actively, proactively in the real world. And some goals are more about changing circumstances. And again, the same things for different people could come from different motivations. So anything that's circumstance-based is probably not as good. And the 6th one is it appropriate for your circumstances? So, for example, I'm in my early 40s. If one of my goals is to earn a gold medal in the Olympics, I don't know if that's very appropriate. So it has to be something realistic. It has to be something, at the end of the day, even though we wanted first to start with a very broad vision, now we're starting to funnel it down and narrow it down, and we do want to introduce reality in the process. So if something is completely inappropriate for your circumstances, give it a lower score. And then you end up, if you do this thing and you rank these goals or you score them, you give yourself a 1 for any good score or good outcome out of these 6, and a 0 for something that's not. So you end up with a number between 0 and 6, and you sort these goals. Now look at the top ones. These top ones are the goals you should pursue. And when I say should, what I mean is the more likely to make you happy when you accomplish them, but even more importantly, the more likely to make you happy when you start pursuing them. So these goals are the most meaningful to you, the most appropriate for you. They're synergistic with each other. They form something that is kind of a very powerful action plan. And the trick is to draw the line, and that brings us to our next big idea of focus. Draw the line, pick the top maybe 10, maybe 12, maybe 15, maybe 5 goals, and just dump everything else and don't think about it. Once you dump it, it's dumped. And it's dumped for a reason. Look at these small set of goals that you have. That's your action plan. And you're kind of ready to go now. And most people report when they look at these this small set of goals that it's really a distillation of this process of, if you remember, let's take a step back. You started thinking about your entire life, and then you built that grand vision, and then you narrowed it down to specific goals that you may want to pursue, and then you ranked them, and then you pruned them, and you kind of dumped some of these goals that you decide not to pursue. Now you have a plan, and now you have clarity. And that clarity is something that stays in your pocket, stays in your mind throughout the day. It's an invaluable thing. So it's a very, very important step. Now, most people will look at this set of goals and will say, well, that's great. I have clarity. But I don't know why I'm sweating so badly. And the reason is, it's really hard at this point. Everything up to this point you did on paper. So you have your little sheet of paper and you have your clarity, and it feels really good, and you should actually linger on it and savor it and enjoy it. But then, of course, it's worthless if you don't hit the road. So that is really the biggest point of friction in this process. And what I'd like to offer at this step for a lot of people, that is our next big idea, is to plan for the first step. I mean, at this point, most likely, even though the plan looks really good, it's not unthinkable that you'll say, what was I thinking? The whole thing looks like a bad idea right now. I don't know. This is like the excuses stage. And it's very, very hard to break that envelope of, going from paper to reality. So what you do is you take one of these goals and you think of a single step, something you can do within the next 7 days, as small as possible. A tiny, 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 tiny step. I can tell you, for example, when I was planning my motorcycle ride, I hadn't even sat on a motorcycle before. I didn't have a license. It was just kind of a dream or a plan, a dream that I turned into a plan that I want to do. So the first step that I put together after going through this process was to go to a Harley dealership and just ask them how to get going about, getting a license. And it was something that took 15 minutes. There was one very close to my home. But I can tell you that it took me a good number of weeks to get over the anxiety of, I'm actually going to be doing this. You go into the dealership, the guy looks at you, you're just like, oh, rolling his eyes, another midlife crisis coming through the door. And it's not a comfortable feeling, because as long as you stay within the realm of the paper, you're safe. You can't fail because you didn't try. Nobody can make fun of you. No one can judge you. Nobody has expectations from you. You're just kind of toying around with stuff. But now you got to do something. So plan one step, even if it's tiny, that you can do within the next 7 days. Something that takes the shortest amount of energy and time to do. And that's the next big idea, the next step. Just do it. Without the context of the entire thing, don't carry the load of your entire plan and your vision on your back. Don't think, I'm going to get a motorcycle license. I'm going to get a big motorcycle. How will I use it? How will I not injure myself? How will I leave home and go on the road for weeks? All of that stuff at this point is just a heavy load for you to carry. Just think about going to the dealership. Just think about that one thing in isolation, the same way you would run an errand, the same way you would go to the post office to mail something, without context. Just do it. And when you do, very important to take a day or two to relax and savor your success, because you're qualitatively moving to a new step, a new big step in the process, which is you're moving from planning to execution. When you have performed your first step, you're actually doing it. And you would be amazed at the range of the spectrum of emotions, the positive emotions that can fill you up when you perform that first step. It's just an amazing feeling that there are two things you can say to yourself with validity, even though it's a tiny step. You can say, I have a very clear plan of what I want from my life. That's a huge thing. And then the second thing you can tell yourself is, and I've already started taking proactively steps towards it. Not too many people can make that statement. So that's huge. And then my last tip, or my last big idea for you today, as you go step by step and as you start pursuing your plans, you're going to hit a lot of challenges. You're going to hit a lot of obstacles, a lot of barriers, so a lot of nails on the road. And every time that something happens, it's a setback. It's going to pull you back. It's really hard to keep motivation. A really good trick is just to look back. Because people often forget. You're in the moment doing this one thing. You're on the side of the road changing that tire or whatever it is that happened. Look back and tell yourself and give yourself a big pat on the shoulder and say, a year ago, I didn't even know what I want out of my life. I didn't know what was meaningful to me. A year ago, I didn't take any steps towards any vision, towards anything. Now look at me now. Look at me now. I'm actually doing this. And the proof that you're actually doing it is those small setbacks, is those small failures. So when you hit the nail on the road, it's not a bad sign. It's a good sign that you're out of your comfort zone. You're doing the things that are challenging and difficult for you because you are trying to fulfill what's meaningful for you in your life. And when you do that, you're bound to fail or to have some obstacles in your way every now and then. If there are no obstacles in your way, you're probably doing something wrong. So keep that in mind. And so those were my 10 big ideas for you today. We're going on the ride of your life one step at a time. I hope you found it helpful. And thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about this concept, you can check out a video of a TEDx talk that I gave in London recently, titled the same title, Going on the Ride of Your Life One Step at a Time. Be well and ride safe.